The men's breakfast. Huh? Brother Mark. Good morning, Brother Mark. What do you? Good job. All right. I do appreciate the guys doing the cooking and all that, and I appreciate you coming. And here you go, Gordy. Good morning. Good morning.
Well, it's here. This is our season that we're going to prepare for the most joyous occasion in our faith, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. No other faith can hold on to God coming to them, dying and returning. And it's just preparation for Easter and for the resurrection that that's all about. And as I was preparing the message for this morning, I was thinking about my family tradition. And I grew up in a family where you gave up something for Lent. And I was kind of thinking, about giving up something for Lent. I had this message in my head.
Give up desserts.
I think God talks that way.
Stop eating sweets.
But then I thought, that's good for me. That'd be good for me. But I'm not sure it would be appropriate for everybody here, not applicable to everybody. So I tried to come up with some ideas that would make our thoughts this morning about Lent on a positive, something we should do, not something that we're supposed to not do. And so, to start with, I looked at the message in Matthew 22, verses 33 to 40. I'd like to share that with you this morning. We know it as the greatest commandment. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together, and one of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? How can we possibly agree? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's straight from the Word of God. The mouth of God. So, frequently when we hear that passage, we forget the first part. And we remember it as love your neighbor. Well, that's fine. But the first part of it said love God with your whole heart and your whole soul. So, okay, maybe that should be our Lenten message. If we're going to have a do instead of a do not, as we prepare ourselves for the resurrection of Jesus, maybe we work at loving God more. So I look at the challenges that get in the way of loving God. Making a commitment to God. A commitment for Lent. That's not bad. That's not a bad idea. In marriage, we make a commitment to another person. With God, our commitment is to do as He directs us to. I've been an alcohol counselor, drug counselor for over 30 years. And part of that is helping people work through the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous program. And step 3 is turning your life over to God. And I was working with a client on step 3, and he came in and he said, you know, Gordy, God talks to me. And I said, well, tell me more about that. And he said, no, seriously. He said, whenever I'm confronted with a problem or I have a decision to make, he said, if I just go somewhere quiet, ask a question, shut up, and listen, I'll hear the answer. He says, but then it seems like I have a habit of saying to myself, well, how about this? Or how about that? Yes, but. And he says, I yes, but myself right back into a call. And he said he wanted to resign from the how about that club or the yes, but club. And step by step, he was learning to trust God. Trust is the foundation of a relationship. We cannot claim to love anybody if we don't trust them. We have to put our trust in people in order to have love with them. We have to put our trust in God in order to love God. That's really the basic message. There was a Catholic priest, Father Martin, who devoted his life to the treatment of alcoholism, and he told this following story. We used it a lot in treatment. He said that he didn't want to hear people say they were getting out of the driver's seat and letting God drive their life. He said that makes no more sense than hurtling down the highway 60 miles an hour and crawling in the back seat saying, God's going to steer my car. He said, God's not going to steer your car. God's not going to make your choices in your life for you. But God gives us driver's ed. God gives us owner's manuals. God gives us warning signs, limits. And we take the road maps and the owner's manuals and we put them in the glove box and we wonder why we get lost. This is our owner's manual. And if we put it in the glove box, we'll get lost. So, the lesson is very straight. In order to love God, we have to trust Him. The second reading I have this morning is from Proverbs 3, verses 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. What an encouraging notion. What a message of trust, to trust the Lord. And many of us, we complicate this. We just make it more difficult than it needs to be. We trust people. We put our trust in people, and then we wonder why we get disappointed. But see, it's easier sometimes to trust people because we can see them. And when we have consistent, predictable behavior over time, that's almost like a mathematical equation. Consistent, predictable behavior over time equals trust. So when we see people acting in consistently predictable behavior, we learn to trust them. And that trust is kind of based on a fact. What we can see and what we can hear. But we cannot see God Our trust in God is based on faith, not on fact. And sometimes our faith in God gets challenged. It's challenged sometimes when God's way isn't our way. And we want something and God maybe wants something else. I tell couples in counseling, any two foolish people can get along when they agree. It takes real faith to get along and to grow when you disagree. And sometimes God's plan differs from our plan. Sometimes people see prayer as kind of, I want one of these, two of them, and a couple of those, and they think of prayer like a big department store, Walmart in the sky. And then they want God to arrange it the way they want it. Jesus gave us a pretty straightforward message on this when he gave us the Lord's Prayer. And in the Lord's Prayer it says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." This equation's not real complicated. I keep repeating myself. Trust God. Trust God, do good, live the way Jesus told us to live, and delight in the Lord. My last reading for this morning comes from John 14, verse 1 to 4. And again, a wonderful message on these same lines. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. Wow. This is my Lenten message this morning. Do not be troubled. Do not feel overwhelmed, but accept the joy that comes with loving God. Accept the peace that we find in the Lord. The peace we find when we have the faith to trust God. During Lent, if your trust and your faith is challenged a little, and you find yourself kind of getting into the yes, but, well, how about mode. And if you find that God's plan for your life during Lent doesn't necessarily agree with what your plan was, it's at those times that we need to open our hearts and thank the Lord for the benefits and the gifts and the love that he gives us every day. And if we turn to that, Lent will be our preparation for the most joyous holiday of our faith, the resurrection.